What's going on, y'all? I have an underrated and potentially overpowered deck to talk about today. It is, of course, Silver Surfer, and I have an interview with someone who has been playing it to the tune of hitting number 7 in the world, YoWoody. YoWoody, you have hit rank 7 with the Silver Surfer list, and Silver Surfer is not a deck that people are thinking of as like a major part of the metagame. So, what is it about this list right now specifically that makes you feel so confident in it and that has given you the results that you have?
Yeah, I'd say the main thing about Surfer right now, and this deck specifically, is that it's kind of just like a toolbox full of different things that cover the pieces of tech that I have on the list are specifically here to be very broadly applicable. Like instead of Rogue, you're running Negasonic, which is just like a tech card where it's like you blow something up, whatever you blow up, it's giving you value. And Mobius is like the bullshit protector. He stops like Mr. Negative and Sarah stuff and Loki from getting one cost 3 drops and doing your stuff all on turn 6 and uh what's the other tech card? Oh yeah, Killmonger, right. Yeah, cuz everyone's playing 1 drops right now. It's like every single good deck right now is playing at least one high value 1 drop that's a good Killmonger target. You got discard with Meek. You got Loki with like Kitty Pride and Quinjet and Phoenix Force. You can just completely like wipe out the Human Torch line, so that it's not something they're allowed to do against you. And there's like popular zoo stuff. So every piece of tech in the deck is like the most broadly applicable tech cards that I wanted to put in the deck. I didn't want to go with anything super specific like Cosmo or Rogue. I just wanted like more broadly applicable tech so that my matchup is better into the field. And then the way the deck is built, you have these broadly applicable tech cards combined with like the Wong, Absorbing Man, Brood, Sebastian Shaw, like Giganut, insane power output. So you can go over the top of some like really greedy decks like Destroy and Discard, and then you can also stop like the lower to the ground kind of scammy decks with your broadly applicable tech cards.
Yeah, I think when I look at what makes this deck different from other Silver Surfer decks, the thing that really sticks out is this deck can actually use Wong well. And we'll talk about Wong a little bit later, but when you dive a little bit deeper there, why does this deck get to use Wong well? You end up at Hope Summers, I think, because like she is the big difference here. Am I wrong in that? Because like she is, it seems like 3 cost Sarah, but a lets like in a way that like Sarah never let this deck play Wong. Hope Summers does. Can you talk to me a
Yeah.
little bit about the influence she has on deck building and on play?
Yeah. I mean, Hope Summers is like definitely like the centerpiece of Surfer right now. Like she is the all-star of the deck. She lets it be this like simultaneously like more mid-rangey, closer to like the old school Surfer, but then also she gives you the ability to have like these insane high roll lines with Wong and Absorbing Man and stuff. And I would say that she is also probably like the highest skill ceiling card to use in the deck because there are a lot of times where like your entire game plan is centered around how you can get the most hope value that game. And like a lot of people would just say like forge brood abs and want to go with that. But a lot of the time it's worth it to just give up forging the brood to get a hope down early and do a double 3 drop thing on turn 5 into a 3 drop plus Wong or 3 drop plus Absorbing Man turn 6. Like she really allows the deck to have such an insane amount of power output, which is super strong when you have these threatening tech cards as well. Like they have to be able to beat your insane high roll, but then also dance around your very generally strong tech cards. Like she just lets you do so many crazy things, and she's honestly the main reason I kept playing this deck because I was playing it originally for the Utopia hot location, and then it just felt super good and like hope she made me. I was like, okay. Like I logged on the day after Utopia was gone, and I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna keep going with Surfer. But then I was like, I don't know. Hope might actually do something here. And then the more I played with it, the more it just was like apparent that she's just insane. Also, she's like Sarah, but she gets the surfer buffs, and you don't care about Mobius. It's so nice to not
Yes.
just be dead to
Yes.
Mobius with this deck.
Yeah, no, like this is like when Hope Summers first came out, my fear with her was, man, I really hope she's not just the Thanos card. And seeing her be used really well in decks like this, in decks like mid-range decks, which I will say are like a little bit outclassed by Thanos, where it's like Thanos is doing pretty much the same thing, but just bigger. This is like an actual use case where I was like, I see her happening here, and it's like that's exactly what this card should be. This is like what Hope should be doing in a world where Thanos is not making everything like centralized. And this is the kind of thing that
Yeah.
probably like Hope will be doing if and when they drop the world's largest nuke on Thanos. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So like I like this is like very much a Hope deck. And it's just sort of shocking to me. Like we talk about how she's just Sarah, but doesn't get got by Mobius and gets the surfer buff. All that's true. But she's like there's something even like more basic there. She's Sarah that doesn't require you to play her on turn 5, meaning you can play a Wong on that turn. And that's what gets you into the game, I think. Is like
Yeah.
it's hard to fit a Wong in the Sarah deck because you only get to play it on 4 or 6. With Hope, suddenly you have a whole extra turn that you can play that card on, and that happens a decent amount of the time in my experience.
Yeah.
So one thing that really does stick out about this deck is there are only 2 cards you can play before turn 3. And while I do agree that Hope can help you make up that tempo, you have a lot of ability to do that. Do you feel like you often need to be playing one of those cards to feel confident in the game? Or do you feel like I'm cool waiting until turn 3 to do my stuff as long as I have a Hope or a Broodabs?
Yeah, I mean, like if you were going up against something that is very snowbally, like Destroy, or something that has like very threatening early game, like Discard, or especially Loki, your early game is really important. Forge in particular is pretty important. Like if you want to forge a Brood or forge your Sebastian Shaw, you kind of have to get that stuff done early. If you want to do like Hope and double 3-drop into 3-drop 4-drop, you don't really have room to fit him. So he's definitely really nice to draw early, but sometimes like on turn 5 you have like you played into the Hope, but then the 3-drops in your hand are like a Killmonger you want to save, a Surfer obviously you want to save, and then like Forge and Brood. So you just end up going Forge Brood instead of like 3-drop 3-drop on turn 5 with the Hope bonus. And Forge is just really good value anyway, but Nova, I would actually not describe Nova as a card that you want to play before the 3rd turn of the game.
This is a
I
Hope
think
card, right?
yes,
Yeah.
almost always you want to save Nova, because if you don't draw Hope, you can just fit him in on 4 or 5, because you're gonna have you're not gonna have to fuck around with like the double 3-drop stuff on 5 or whatever. And then if you do draw Hope, he really lets you have a strong early game while still doing like the crazy Hope stuff, because you can do Forge Brood, which is like the best turn 2, turn 3 that this deck can do, and then you can still do Hope plus Nova on 4 for a double 3-drop on 5, which is like it's insane that he just lets you double dip into both of those lines. And honestly, I didn't even really consider the possibility when I was building the deck. The main reason I included Nova was just because like I hated not drawing Surfer and not being able to get like Sebastian Shaw and Brood value. But holding Nova is like actually a very important thing to know you have to do in this deck.
I'm glad we sort of got to it because that was going to be like we're about to jump into the next phase of the interview, which is where I ask you like one question about each of these cards and then we go from there, right? That was going to be my question for Nova, so now I have to think of a new question for Nova on the fly. Good luck to me with that. We're going to jump right into that right now. So we've discussed how Nova is very often a play or always a play that is happening late in the game. Are there any circumstances where you're thinking, maybe I don't even want a Nova in the deck? Is this sometimes going to be a card where you're like, maybe I can replace it with like another 2-drop, like a Jeff or anything along those lines? Has that ever occurred to you? Or are you just very set on Nova, good with Hope, good with Brood, good with Sebastian Shaw, good enough to run?
Yeah, I think that's about it. Like Nova is essentially like baby Silver Surfer in this deck. He's just board wide buffs that, you know, he triggers your Sebastian Shaw, he buffs all your broodlings, your Absman broodlings. He's just like the perfect one drop for the deck, honestly, because he allows you to, you know, buff your entire board, but then having a one drop is really important for hope stuff. And then if you don't want to do like Surfer Abs with the extra energy, or you don't have the cards in hand to do that, on turn 6 you have like one extra energy. You can do Nova Killmonger Surfer, which is also like an insanely strong turn 6 play. Um, he's good because if you want to do something I've done before is like I get extra energy on turn 5. I have 6 energy, so I go like Forge into, or like Nova Forge Killmonger, and then it like allows you to play to your Hope lane, and then also clear a spot open so that you can like brood that lane next turn into Absorbing Man or Brood Surfer. Like he just is such a good tool for this deck and works like really synergistically with everything and is a good backup plan. And also, Nova is a great bluff equity card, because if you don't draw Killmonger but your opponent sees a Nova on the board and they're playing something that's going to die to Killmonger, a lot of the time they just leave.
I would leave in those situations because the Nova
Yeah.
is kind of a hard tell, right? Yeah, no, I'm with
Yeah.
it. I'm with it. How often is Forge a play you are saving for Wong if you don't necessarily have good targets early in the game? How compelled do you feel to be like, I gotta play this Forge on 2? I'm probably not gonna have time otherwise if I don't have a hope in hand.
I'd say most of the time, even with Wong in hand, I just rip the Forge. Like, if especially if I have Nova in hand, especially, I will always play Forge on 2, because like even if I don't have the card to Forge in hand, if I have like Nova Hope, like I said, you can do 2-drop, 3-drop Hope Nova, and then still get to do double 3-drop on 5. So like a lot of the times in this Surfer deck, you're playing for a top deck, whether it's turn 5 top deck or turn 6 top deck. Like you might like leave a open-ended Forge on the board on turn 5 in order to try to top deck like Shaw or Brood. And Forge is really like the best example of playing for a top deck in this deck. Like if you don't have Brood or Sebastian Shaw in hand and you have Forge in hand on 2, most of the time I'm just playing him because like he's a 2/4, he's buffing your hope, and sometimes your hope lane gets like clogged with some junk that you're playing there just for the extra energy. So having like the extra 2 power in that lane isn't even that bad.
Is this the best card in the deck? Like, would this deck exist if Brood didn't?
Nah, nah. This deck would not exist if Brood didn't. Like, Surfer is your primary game plan. It's the way of buffing like all of your 3-drops, but Brood and Shaw are what give Surfer like insane amounts of value and what really make doing a double Surfer thing worth doing at all.
Yeah.
And not only that, like I said, Nova's a good backup plan, but the best backup plan this deck has is Forge Brood Abs. Like that's the best backup plan it has. Forge Brood Abs tech cards, like if you have relevant tech cards, that's your best way of limping with this deck. So I mean, Brood is, you know, a tale as old as time. Him and Surfer are just best friends. They have always been in the same decks together, except for that one Surfer deck that is now obsolete.
Shout out to
But
Three
yeah,
Cost Werewolf, the one thing that can
yeah.
push Brood out of its own deck.
Please bring it back. But yeah,
So you mentioned that one of the best ways to limp into games with this deck was with Forge Brood Abs, right? And Negasonic feels like right at home in a Forge Brood Abs plan. How often are you taking priority to make her work when you're not doing that? Because it feels like a lot of the power this deck has is it has a lot of ability to play from behind, play from these like explode power with the Wong game plans, explode power with, you know, Surfer Abs, right? But if everything doesn't come together, what are you doing with Negasonic when you need to just like play it on turn 5, right? Like when you just be like, I'm putting this here on turn 5, I gotta predict things. What are you thinking about with that? Because you're not gonna have turn 6 prio.
yeah, that's actually a great question. So Negasonic does not need to have priority to be useful, and actually a lot of the times, like obviously on turn 6 she does, but if you're playing her pre-turn 6, a lot of the time you do not want priority, because like if you're thinking ahead with Negasonic, you kind of have to be thinking Like, what are they going to play this turn if you have priority? But then if you don't have priority, you're going into the final turn or turn 5. You're like, what are they going to want to play and where are they going to want to play next turn? So Negasonic is like a very. She's kind of like. She's just like Giga Echo, where she's like, you cannot play that thing here unless you do something else here first. So she's like really, really limiting in what your opponent can do. And in games where, like, let's say you're playing against Clog or something, Clog kind of clogs their own stuff too. So if you can, like, put Negasonic in a location where your opponent can only play one card on the final turn of the game, then she pretty much just secures that location. And if you're playing her for turn 6 value, a lot of the time you don't want to blow up like whatever shitty thing they're playing on turn 5. Like, you want her to be the threat for the thing they're going to play on 6. So it's actually like you kind of have to think multiple turns in advance, because before the Negasonic turn, you're like, do I want priority this turn so I can kill the thing they play this turn, or do I want to drop Prio so I can just set her here and have her be like that, no, you can't play here next turn type of thing.
What percentage of games, just ballpark it for me, involve doing this card's effect twice?
I mean, for me,
Yeah.
I don't really draw this card.
Oh, well,
So
okay. For like your average player drawing this card, like, no, like in an optimal world, what would you say? How often are you doing that? My worry, the reason I'm asking this question, my worry is basically people will tunnel on the double surfer, right? And in doing so, miss some of the other ways you can win with this deck. And I guess I just want to know how core double surfer is, because obviously it's important, but the deck can win without it. No.
no, the deck can definitely win without it. And a lot of times you'll like set up a double surfer turn with your hope, and then you're like, oh shit, actually Killmonger is insane here. Oh shit, actually, Negasonic just secures this lane on her own. So I would say you are always like from turn 1, essentially this is the line you are always playing for, right? Like, putting aside like, oh, I just saw this guy, I know what deck he's playing, whatever. Like, in a vacuum, this is the line you're always playing for, is double surfer. But how often you're actually doing it, like in an ideal world, I'd say probably like 50% of turn 6s are double surfer, and you do have to be careful to not tunnel vision on the line, because like a lot of the time you set up a double surfer and you have like a Mobius and a Shaw on the board, right? And then you like top deck Brood, and you're like, okay, well, double surfer is not even really that worth it because I don't have Brood on the board, so I might as well just go Brood surfer and put like a big threat in this lane instead of like small go wide. But I would say you always want to play for that line and then just like react to what's happening.
Killmonger, best tech card or bestest tech card?
Yeah, I would say probably a strong bestest on this one.
Okay.
Killmonger is just like I was talking about before. He's just insane right now. Like, he kills Thanos a lot of the time, just like single handedly. You just win Thanos games because of Killmonger. Like, he's killing Meeks and Blades. He's killing Kitty Prides and Quinjets. He's like part of the reason that this deck has actually like a decent matchup into Destroy is because you have like these big numbers, and then you can either Prio drop kill the Deadpool or gain Prio Negasonic something big on the last turn. So it's like you can have like these scary 50-50 lines, or like no matter what you do, you're kind of damned either way. He's just so good right now. Like, certain matchups are just free. Like, people are playing Zoo with um like Mockingbird and stuff. He just cleans those decks up. Like, Killmonger's just insane value, and he's also part of your kind of backup buff game plan of Killmonger Nova.
He is exactly as good as he looks in that art.
Exactly, yeah. Actually just got that same Killmonger split today.
Dude, the way the waterfall goes behind him,
Yeah, I
like
know,
it's
right?
so sick. It's so cool. It's like molten gold. It rocks. Mobius is, I think, a card that is just you're sort of priced into running right now, where it's just like, all right, there's a bunch of people playing Mockingbird. I guess I gotta play the Mobius. This card I gotta play. People playing Loki. I guess I gotta play it. In a world where Thanos and Loki didn't exist, is there another card you'd be considering in this slot? Because this does feel like a more flexible slot. It's just like right now it's not flexible at all, but in other worlds it could be. And are there other tech cards you'd consider here?
Yeah, I mean, Mobius. First of all, like right now, Mobius is insane. For actually a few reasons, because he's very good against two of the top meta decks, Loki and Thanos. But also, the meta is so open right now, and Mobius just fucks random shit up. Like
Yeah.
if you're
You're
playing in an
playing
open
Sheena.
meta,
Oh, cool. You're
yeah,
dead.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
You're playing Sheena, you're playing Sarah Tech, you're
yeah.
playing Surfer with Sarah.
Yeah.
Like you're just dead. You're
Yeah.
playing Mr. Negative. Like I just get to snap you back on the negative. Like he just stops so much random bullshit that even if Thanos and Loki weren't in the game, he's still like a hard consideration. But there are other cards, like other decks would become, I think, more threatening that don't rely on Mobius. So I'd probably, in the Mobius slot, my biggest considerations would be like Cosmo, Juggernaut, or Rogue. And I'd
Mm.
lean more towards probably Cosmo.
See,
Uh,
I got to two of those. I got to like, okay, you do like Cosmo Rogue. Juggernaut's an interesting one. Can you try to sell me on him right now?
yeah, I mean, Juggernaut is just like Cosmo, Rogue, like the same type of. I'm targeting the same stuff with him essentially, but he's more widely applicable. Like I said, like I like widely applicable tech cards. So like if my opponent's playing like Exodia Wong,
Mm.
like Cosmo will shut that down, but Juggernaut will also shut that down, and Juggernaut also provides disruption versus like discard or Shuri or something that's going really big, or you know some of the other. He's just like a Swiss Army knife. Juggernaut works. Cosmo only works versus on reveal. Juggernaut can also fuck up like a Tribunal deck if they do like Onslaught and then they're telegraphing like a Mystique Iron Man or something like that. Juggernaut works versus those, whereas Rogue, that would be like a 1 in 3 or 50-50 or something. So he kind of just gets you like both halves of the coin, but a little bit less consistent. Whereas like if you're going to win because of a Rogue or you're going to win because of a Cosmo, you just like know what's happening.
Scale of 1 to 10, how unplayable is this deck without Hope Summers? Actually, let's rephrase that. How playable is this deck without Hope Summers? Scale of 1 to 10, 1 being unplayable. It's an
Probably
okay answer if you yeah.
like a 4
And with
right
Hope Summers?
now. With Host Plumbers, it's. I mean, I hit 7th with it.
Yeah.
I would call it like a 9.
Okay. So like that's just sort of illustrating like I get a lot of people who are asking, like, okay, can I play this without expensive card in it? And I think like this is one of those cases where it's like you probably can't. I would not recommend you play
Yeah.
the deck without Hope Summers. And there's honestly, like, we've talked about her a lot. We've talked about how core she is a lot. She came up so much in the previous section because she's so core to why the deck even functions that there's honestly not enough to say now because she's that core that we had to cover her in talking about the deck overall.
Yeah, one thing I will say about one of the reasons that the deck gets so much less playable into Hope is because this deck is actually very competitive into Thanos, and the main three reasons are Killmonger, Mobius, and Hope. Those are like the main three reasons you're competitive into Thanos. Mobius, if you get him down early, you can just kind of like rug pull a greedy Thanos player for trying to get a free Mockingbird. Killmonger, obviously, it's like they go hand in hand. You rug pull the free Mockingbird, you catch them with their pants down with all these stones on the board, you Killmonger them off the board. And then Hope, they are playing Mobius. So, like, you can't run Sarah and be competitive into Thanos. You can't run Sarah and be competitive into, like, Alioth or Professor X because it's just such a weak tempo play. Uh, and that's why she's so important.
Sebastian Shaw, what is the largest you have made him? Just ballpark largest Sebastian Shaw you've ever done.
I believe it was 38.
What is the average for a Sebastian Shaw that you've made?
I think the average Shaw in this deck is probably like 12 power.
Yeah, 312, not bad. All right. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's really that's like there's not much to say about this guy. He's a beat stick, right? So what he's
yeah.
beating for, what his numbers are, that's what matters.
He's nice when you're also playing for like a prio drop play, because like
Mm.
if if you're playing to drop prio and like a matchup that you're comfortable doing that, then he's just like the biggest guy, and they can't do anything about him because you're adding the bus after they want to tech him. So
Got a mean Widow's Peak too. The Widow's Peak Sideburns combo is actually crazy. Like that
yeah, it's
is
goated.
Talk to me about Gladiator. I get it. You're running him because he's a 3/8, but like there's a lot of stuff where you pull it off a Gladiator, you're just like, oh shit, right now. Is there anything you'd replace him with, or is it just like you like I can't replace him with like a utility 3/5? He's just too big. That's like too much of a drop off.
Yeah, if I was gonna replace Gladiator, honestly, I might consider doing it with Swordmaster. I just think that yeah, I know. I think that a very important part of this deck is having just a pretty big guy that can't be shanged or Shadow Kinged to limp with when you're doing like I want to win with tech cards game plan, or a big guy that you can play to get priority for your Negasonic, or like you want to feel safe against Goliath or Magneto going to a final turn. Like I think having big stats on your body is very important. So if I was running if I couldn't run Gladiator, there are other things that I said I might consider like Thor or Dakin or stuff like that, but they don't really accomplish the same things he does. And I would consider like literally replacing Gladiator with Swordmaster and replacing one of your utility threes with Cosmo just so that you get to run that.
Yeah, I can see it. Wong almost feels like a luxury in a deck like this, where it's like you have all this ability to like play him now, and that is good. And I do think that is what sets this deck apart from other Surfer decks, where it's just like you can actually compete with discard and destroy just on numbers, which otherwise you would be totally 100% unable to do. And having that ability is pretty key on the Wong. I think that my question for him is then, or my question for you about him is then, what is he doing in other matchups? Or is he like very much just like he's here to beat the dumb guy points decks and that's really all he's doing? And most of the rest of the time, you're playing a more intricate tech card and points mix? Or like, how often are you committing to, I'm gonna play a bunch of points?
I mean, the thing about Wong is that a lot of the time in the deck, he is also just like four cost abs man, because like if you want to do like you have like the insane high roll, like you can beat most other things just trying to do points that aren't like tribunal line of like Wong into double three drop on Hope into Surfer on Wong, abs on Wong. That's like the Exodia combo. But Wong and Absman just let you like they push your power output over the edge individually as well. So like you don't need a Wong and an Absman. Sometimes you just need one or the other. And Wong also allows you to commit to doing like Forge Brood abs, and then you can do like Wong 3 drop 3 drop. So you don't always have to hold the Absman for a double surfer. He lets you do like the Brood abs and double surfer lines together. And he's also great for bluff equity because you don't draw
Sure.
Surfer every time, but if you're in a matchup where like you don't think that they can fuck with what you're doing and you hard telegraph that you're about to double Surfer, like a lot of the time they just leave.
Coming off of that last segment, it's my time to remind you of bluff at your own risk. I think this works a lot better for Woody because he's playing against people who are very good at the game and know what that stuff
Yeah.
means. So
Yeah.
if you're like in rank 60 and you're like, I'm bluffing these dudes and they're not
Yeah.
leaving, they might just not know what you're doing. There is something to consider
Yeah.
about that. Absorbing man. Here's what I want you to break it down for me. Pie chart, right? Silver Surfer, Brood, Other. What's the split?
Mm, it's probably like it's probably like 70% Brood, honestly. like 70% brood, and then like 25% surfer,
Like,
5% other.
yeah, okay, that makes sense. That was sort of what I figured. This because it's like, absorbing man is not like, you'd rather have a forged brood than an absorbing man brood because those
Yeah.
are all 3 drops you hit. But you're not going to turn down absorbing manning a brood ever, basically, right? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
the broodlings. It's important to note for those who are unaware are still going to be 3 drops even though they come out of absorbing man. All right, so is there anything you think that someone picking up this deck for the first time should know that we have not covered?
I mean, I would just say generally that the deck is much more complex in its lines turn to turn, even though a lot of time you're only playing like 1 card per turn for the first like 4 or 5 turns of the game. You definitely need to just like slow down and think ahead with the deck. And also, uh, it's kind of a retreat a lot deck. I have like a 50% win rate almost exactly with this deck, up like 200 cubes. It's a retreat a lot and snap early deck because, like I said, when you're playing a deck like this, at least like, once again, like bluff at your own risk, whatever, yada yada. But if you're playing a deck like this that has very telegraphed lines, like if you play a forge onto the raft, right, and then you snap, your opponent's gonna leave because they think you're gonna play a brood on the raft. They're gonna leave, so you have to snap before that. And since it's a retreat a lot deck, you really do want to maximize when you're snapping, which just means identifying if it's either A, a matchup that you can go over the top of because your hand is good, or B, a matchup that your tech cards are going to fuck over. Like, if I see my opponent play Quinjet Coulson and then they snap me on 3, I'm instantly snapping back, and I will Mobius on 4, and it's just so impossible for them to, like, Loki you and come from behind and beat you. So, my advice is just, like, take it slow, focus on the next turns, like what's happening in the next turns, and snap aggressively.
All right. So, Woody, where can people find more from you?
Streaming 6 days a week on twitch.tv/YoWoodyMJ, and I also have a Twitter where I post decks like this sometimes at YoWoody2.
All right, y'all. Make sure you follow YoWoody on those platforms. And of course, as always, I've been Cam Best. Thank you for making it this far in the video. Remember, like and subscribe here too. It helps me a ton. And like and subscribe whatever Woody puts out, both on Twitch and on Twitter. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next one.